solar system, our bodies, the table next to you, the glass of wine at dinner, and so on. Your mind does not create that. Those are created out of the templates from the universal consciousness expressed through what Buddha called the Kalapa, or the individual unit, which is the collision of all of these energies. So there is only now, and the complexity from which we get expressions of now is vastly large beyond our understanding, and not the small constrained timeline view that might be presented. So I don't think of time as a river with myself standing on the side of the bank of it. I think of myself as swimming in a giant sea of continuous creation, and one small element of the sea washing against my consciousness, if you will, the water against my body, is felt as time. I hope that made sense. End of statement.
I meant not the time quantity, I meant the time quality. So your answer was for me about the time quantities and the linear times, but not the time signatures, if you want, or time qualities. I'm not so good in English.
I understand, and I skirted your point indeed. Let's stop for a second and examine time in the sense of quantity and quality. And let us also, before we begin that, assume that we're all vibrating entities that are composed of nothing but energy. In order for ourselves to exist within universe, the way that, say, a software program or a telephone call might exist in a digital universe, they have to be identified with a unique characteristic. So, in the case of telephone calls, we use phone numbers, etc. So we can think of ourselves as giant vibration of energies, and we each have a unique signature that identifies you, no matter where you might be in physical universe, even though we know that physical universe doesn't actually exist and you don't ever actually go anywhere. But in order to find the particular you or me from any others, we would be able to need to know their individual signature. That signature at a vibrational level is what allows, for instance, thoughts to come into your mind and experience it that way. So your experience with the quality of time change, I would believe, and can state from my understanding, relates to something being added to your signature state, if you will. It's called a witness reference in science terms, or computer terms. And in other words, your universal name, for instance, probably has had something added to it. When we get into the Jain understanding of karma, they also express it by stating that at the time you're born, for instance, certain karma determines the length of your life, the shape of your body, how many teeth are going to need fillings, etc., etc. But your life is not limited to those. It's not a fixed state. You can add or detract from those as you go forward by knowing how karma works. But some karma stems from previous actions in previous lives, and you might think of as a gift, if you will, from universe for having been a good human in a previous life, if you will. And thus, at this particular time, universe has chosen to add something to your personal individual signature within itself that opens you up to more of the experience of the vastness of universe. Now, the issue is that universe may have a large gifting mode going on, but it will be our individual karma, if you will, our individual signatures that are on our vibrational life energies that allow us to perceive some and not perceive others. So getting back to the quality component of time. The quality component of time is the experience of time within the individual mind. And we know that there is a collective understanding of this experience going on at the moment. All through my long life here, I have always experienced each second of that life as slightly smaller than the second before it. Thus, the concept of time rushing as one ages, and how a year at age 50 is a smaller percentage of my life than a year at age 8. And it is experienced that way. However, we may be coming into, or there's evidence to support the idea that since 1940, our solar system has been gradually moving into an area of space that contains energies of which we know very little. These energies probably have added that extra signature to your witness reference, and thus you are experiencing a quality of time. You may be ahead of the curve, so to speak, from some karmic viewpoint in the past that has decided you're a good fellow and you need to have this now, that you may learn something from it and perhaps take some people through it later on as things progress. And what you're actually experiencing is a level of depth, if you will, a richness that most of us others are not. Or that in my case, I'm experiencing an increased richness in the complexity of the experience of the key fields, but I'm not getting, per se, an extra feeling for time. It is a more broad feeling entirely. And this is undoubtedly directly related to my particular karmic expression within universe at the moment. End of statement.
Oh, thank you so much. Deep thank you from my inner heart. I experienced this in the same way, and it's very nice to have these rare answers of these questions. And yes, I'm overwhelmed. Thank you.
Please do not thank me. Universe has obviously decided that we must be discussing this at this point for both of our illumination and education. Still here, a slight hiccup in the software.
Hi, Clif. Could you tell us if the pole shift goes ahead, what will happen in really far south, like the south of Argentina?
Yes. The evidence that we have from Hapgood must be crossed over to what has been called forbidden archaeology. Hapgood was an extremely good researcher for the pole shifts, but he had his mind occluded by academic understanding. So, for instance, we can take some data points. Lake Titicaca in the Andes Mountains was at one point sea level, and its oceanic base and its sediments prove this. There are further indications that it went from sea level condition to nearly 11,000 feet over the course of what may have been only 3 or 4 days. The resulting upthrust was such that half the population in existence at that seaport at that time died from the destruction of their local infrastructure. Very large buildings with megalithic stone were shifted, and this is the only place on the planet that we've ever seen destruction of a megalithic structure. So, for instance, earthquakes have never disturbed the Great Pyramids, and they have not altered Angkor Wat, and they haven't affected any of the other larger structures, for instance, in the Mesoamerican era, where places like Machu Picchu all the way up through the various cities in Central America have been essentially earthquake impervious. So whatever happened in Lake Titicaca was related, we think, to this pole shift. Hapgood states that he thought that the upthrust was indeed an effect of a pole shift at the time, but he didn't go into the details on it. But if we look at a globe and examine how the line of the Andes goes on up through the Rockies and a few other elements relative to the crust, we can make some assumptions. But first, before we make the assumptions as to outcome, we should make some presumptions and state that we know a few things about the planet, and we need to open our thinking a bit. So, for instance, planet Earth is not solid. The mantle is not solid. It should be better understood as a collection of rocks that have all decided to snuggle up to each other, and the rocks are various different sizes. And thus it makes it easier for us to imagine some rock masses, such as a particular continent, deciding to subside as it goes through the equator, and others deciding to rise. So, given that presumption, then we can go on to certain assumptions. The assumptions from Hapgood state that no pole shift ever occurred that he's been able to find any record of that was less than 30 degrees. A 30-degree pole shift moves some part of the planet through the equator. If you're part of that section of the planet going through the equator, you will have a rough time. Thus, the assumption is that the further away you are from the equator in the transit, the less likelihood that that particular part of the planet you're on would go through the equator. Thus, the sighting of the seed vault up in the Arctic Circle area, because no matter what, if it shifts 30 degrees from where it is at, it will not have to transit through the equatorial rush and all the waters and the problems. This is also likely true of far south, South America, may be true of South Africa, certainly will be true of New Zealand, although Australia offers certain issues, especially relative to what the powers that be are doing there. In other words, if we knew that Australia was to be a survival point, I would think that it might be inimical to the open sovereign individual simply because the powers that be are so heavily ensconced there. Now, South America offers some other issues. There are social movements underway that suggest the powers that be are attempting to consolidate their hold over what might be survival sites. We note the Hyundai Cross points to Cusco, Peru, and the caves that are there. Yet those caves have now been sealed and are under the control of the Peruvian military. Other survival sites within the Latin American or South American mountain ranges are also under stress relative to social conditions coming from the powers that be. Then there's the final issue to consider, and that is that if indeed this pole shift is not like others of the past, and I can discuss some evidence that that is true, then we have some issues with being very high up. It increases your exposure to radiation and so forth. While it might protect you from some sea level sloshing, you're also going to have a hard and rough time of it, and it would not necessarily be an easy level of survival. And again, we don't know if there's going to be a crustal shift or if we're also going to have a continental disappearance. We can look back at this thing called the Narmer Plate. Narmer is the Narmar is the name that the people gave their country in what we now think of as Pharaohic Egypt. These individuals existed before the pharaohs, and they were the source of the civilization that the pharaohs inherited. And the Egyptians took over, and we always, academic science says the Egyptians invented. This is not true. They were inheritors of things. One of the things that has come down is this hard clay, vitrified clay, stoneware, if you will, plate that describes 11 previous pole shifts. And it puts it in perspective in each and every one of them, saying, for instance, in the pole shift that occurred some 48,000 years back, it was a minor deal and caused minor flooding and minor problems to the civilization at the time. But the ones on either side of that by